Hello, my name is Dr. Stephen Comover. Today I'd like to talk to you about a philosophy that has touched the hearts and minds of millions worldwide. That philosophy is atheism. If theism is the belief in God, atheism is the opposite. A belief that there is no higher power and no world beyond the physical one. The word itself is derived from the Greek a, without, theos, God. Throughout its history, atheism has built up a nasty reputation due to the misperception that God and morality are part of the same package, as it were, and thus without the one, God, you are left without the other, morality. However, as we shall see, this perception of atheism as a negative worldview is nothing more than a historical accident. In reality, it is the conclusion reached by rational minds who do not perceive the need for any supernatural deity and understand the world through natural and physical causes. Some of the greatest minds ever to grace this planet have adopted atheistic principles. Take Albert Einstein and Thomas Jefferson, for example. They both said that the idea of a personal God was simply absurd. In fact, it could be said that the highest points in human history, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, or the 60s, for example, were the periods in which humanity decided that it didn't need religion in order to survive, and thus sought the answers on their own. By comparison, the lowest points... Give me that. By comparison, the lowest points in human history, periods like the Dark Ages, the Inquisition, or the 1940s, for example, are characterized by intensely passionate religious groups. Consequently, more and more people are opening their eyes and accepting a more universal worldview. To help bring light on the subject, we have asked several atheists to explain why they have chosen an atheistic worldview. I was actually in church when I realized that I didn't believe in God. It was sort of a sublime moment, sort of a secular enlightening, if you will. Because up until then, I had just been going through the motions, never really analyzing what I believed. Turns out, what I believed never held water under scrutiny. Yeah, so to me, God is like a contradiction, you know what I mean? Like, how can he be infinitely loving and all that shit and still have the balls to send people to hell, huh? Totally contradicts itself. A contradiction? I'll tell you it's a contradiction. In the Old Testament, God calls homosexuality an abomination, and then goes on to say that it's perfectly fine to own slaves. Oh, and as if that isn't enough, Leviticus 21:17 says that anyone without a perfect body is not fit for God. Oh, and as if that isn't enough, the four Gospels give differing accounts of Jesus' birth. How is that possibly infallible? And did you know that what we think of as hell isn't even in the Bible? Yeah, get this, it blew my mind. What we translate as hell actually refers to some real place outside Jerusalem where they used to send convicts and garbage. It was sort of like the Australia of biblical times, right? So anyways, they would burn it up every once in a while to clear some space. So it makes sense that that fire and brimstone would become the metaphysical place that we think of as hell today. So you can use it as a scare tactic to, frighten small children into obeying you. So in that sense, it's really no different than, the boogeyman or Santa Claus.
Yeah, the reason I think we're seeing this increase towards secularism is because people are getting turned off by how militant religion has become. Well, with Islamic extremists on the one hand and then Christian administrations on the other. People like religion because it helps them cope, but nowadays, coping involves copious amounts of explosives and casualties.
The way I see it, atheistic morality is, in a sense, more genuine than theistic reality. I act virtuously for the good of myself and for the good of humankind, while the theist, on the other hand, acts virtuously to, earn God's approval or out of fear of God's judgment. So, while I'm technically an atheist in that I don't believe in God, I don't think that says much about who I am as a person. What I am is a humanist. The question of God and morality is a fascinating one. Plato wrote a dialogue in which Socrates asks, do the gods choose what is good because of its goodness, or is the good good because the gods choose it? If the former is true, and the gods choose what is good because of its goodness, then we see that goodness is separate from and independent of the gods. If the latter is true, and God's choosing something renders it good, then goodness becomes arbitrary, and we are left to wonder if God should ever choose an atrocity like torture, for example, would that make torture good? But of course, God would never choose torture because torture is wrong. But then, of course, if that's the case, torture was wrong before the gods chose it, and thus it follows that goodness and morality are not so simply because God chooses it. To bring the conclusion home, God and morality are not the same.
I'd like to quote Steven Pinker, if I may. He was the 2006 Humanist of the Year. He says, "Aside from fundamentalists, most people outside the United States have given up on creationism and seeing the Earth as the center of the universe. More and more of what used to be the domain of religion has been ceded to science. It's the trend of modernity. I think this is a tide. We've seen it happen everywhere else in the developed world. This is the direction of history." I think it's important to note that the growth of atheism shows a clear correlation with countries with really healthy societies, where people's needs are met, food, water, shelter, healthcare provision, education, where those are all taken care of, religiosity dwindles. So why does the US seem like an exception to this rule? It has over 53% of its population believing in the biblical creation account, 51% believing in a necessary connection between God and morality, and over 70% expressing absolute certainty in their conviction of God's existence. This is explained when one remembers that America is one of the most unequal post-industrial societies in the world, with many sectors being exposed to high degrees of economic insecurity, threats of unemployment, fear of sudden illnesses without adequate health care, and vulnerability to crime.
No, atheism isn't about anger and vengeance for oppression. It's about love. And trust me, I know a thing or two about love. It's about accepting everyone and refusing to discriminate on the basis of what you believe. Because, honestly, what has religion done for us besides separate us into warring sects?
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that this is still under debate. A lot of countries are moving away from religion, and I cannot see why America does not wish to follow. What really drives the point home is the clear connection between education and how you say, religiousness, or what was that? Thank you. Religiosity. As one gains education, one sheds ignorance, and one finds less need for the spoon-fed answers that one goes to religion for.
So I think it's pretty safe to say that the world will gradually move away from religion as more and more of its audience becomes disillusioned. Alternatively, we could all be going to hell.